It's hard to believe that just a couple of years into my career, I was advising a client worth $100 million, also known as a centimillionaire. I can remember being so excited to share my goal that I was going to earn $100 million. And I remember he kind of smiled, smirked a little bit, and he said, Annette, that is a terrible goal. You don't want to earn $100 million. You want to accumulate $100 million. When you have $100 million in the bank, you have choices. You have so much more control over your future, your destiny. People who are making $100 million oftentimes have very few assets. It was just mind boggling to me. I could not even get my head around it. It just did not make any sense to me. But that insight changed the financial trajectory of my life, and hopefully it will yours too. If you learn one thing from today's insight, it's how you think about money. And the one thing I will tell you about centimillionaires is they think about money very differently than most people. Hi, my name is Annette Bau, your host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. I'm a certified financial planner and founder of the Millionaire Insider. For over 30 years, I have been advising and researching the top 1% of millionaires, and I am passionately obsessed with money, mindset, and the intersection of self-worth and net worth, and how the two connect and allow us to live fulfilled and wealthy lives on our terms. I'm a Midwestern girl who had a dream, began investing $25 a month 35 years ago, and today have a multi-million-dollar net worth. I teach the tried and true that only someone with over 3 decades of experience advising millionaires would know. This podcast is different about much more than money. We talk about mindset, success, money blocks, worth barometer, and all aspects of money and topics from practical manifestation, along with real-world how-to and everything in between, with the goal of making your journey easier and more fun. Think of this as coffee, actually matcha tea, learning real-world common sense money and life advice from a BFF that you can start applying today. If you want to create a financially free life you love, you are in the right place, my friend. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. So today you're learning 4 life-changing lessons I learned from a centimillionaire. This is a millionaire who has $100 million net worth. Yeah, it's a lot of money. What you're going to learn today is what is a centimillionaire, how they think, how they prioritize and make decisions, the KKDK trap that some of them get into, how they see relationships, as well as net worth versus income. And I'm going to start with 4 lessons, and I'm going to start with the 4th, then the 3rd, then the 2nd, then the 1st. If you want one of the best resources on millionaires, you can access our Millionaire Secrets at themillionaireinsider.com/20MIS. That's 20MIS. How they think, what they do. You can access this free guide where I share 20 of the best Millionaire Insider secrets I've learned over the last 35 years advising and researching wealthy clients at themillionaireinsider.com/20MIS. The insight you're going to learn in this resource is priceless, and it's unavailable because very few people have spent 35 years entrenched in the lives of millionaires. Again, you can access it for free at themillionaireinsider.com/20MIS. You're going to love this resource. So let's dive in. For today's show notes and resources, go to themillionaireinsider.com/13. For all shows, go to themillionaireinsider.com/podcast. In high school, I was a waitress, and I met a lot of the millionaires that lived in our rural community in the Midwest. And they shared stories of traveling, business deals, and lifestyle. I was fascinated. In fact, I realized the one thing missing from my life and how miserable it was that I didn't have money. And I knew that once I had money, everything in my life would be amazing. As a result, I chose a career where I could both help people as well as make an unlimited amount of money. My ideal client when I started out as a financial advisor was a male entrepreneur who owned a small business. They were driven, focused, made very quick decisions, and they loved my thought process and my follow through. One of my first millionaires was to a centimillionaire, And he gave me some priceless insight. Over the course of my career, I had an opportunity of working with some other centimillionaires as well as learning a lot about them in my research. And the insight I gained was priceless. Today, you're going to learn 4 life changing lessons I learned from these mega millionaires. All materials on intellectual property are copywritten by themillionaireseries.com. The information we provide is not intended to replace any advisor or specialist or to provide you any investment, financial, tax, retirement, or any planning or healthcare advice. All participants agree to hold millionaireseries.com and its affiliates harmless for results achieved or not achieved. So, what is a centimillionaire? It basically means the person has $100 million or more in their personal assets, meaning their net worth, not income, but assets, like their home, their business, cash in the bank, investments, etc. Now, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I can't wait to be a millionaire." And then when you start listening to them, what they're really saying is they want to earn $1 million. Well, this is what I want you to understand. When you earn $1 million, first thing you have is business expenses. So let's just say you have, most people will say they have about 30 or 40% in business expenses. So 40% of a million would be 400,000. So now you're at 600,000. Then you've got taxes that need to be paid. Now, depending on how you're structured, maybe you're going to pay yourself that. Then you have to pay taxes. So on 600,000, let's just say you have to pay 40% in taxes. So if you take 600,000 times 0.6, you'd have 360,000 left. So accumulating a million is very different than if you earn a million. So you just got to be aware of that. Now, while most people and most conversations are just about millionaires, meaning they have $1 million in net worth, today we're discussing the super rich, people that have a ton of money. So the first thing we're going to dive into is how they think. My experience may be different from others, and the insight I got from my first centimillionaire as well as other ones was priceless. And while some of you may see some of the insight as negative, if you learn from it, regardless of how much your net worth is or what your goals are, it can be priceless for you just like it was for me. So the first thing that I found in common with almost every centimillionaire, and these were people really that earned it as compared to inheriting it, but most of them were very bottom line, and their focus oftentimes was solely on money. Many had health and relationship challenges, and I learned early on that there was a price to pay to achieve that level of success for most people. And it boiled down to really their health and their relationships. Now, many of the stories were exciting and intriguing, and others were depressing and mind boggling. But what I found from my own experience were 4 key insights. And so these aren't really necessarily in order, except for that the most important one is at the end. So the first one that I'm going to share is wealth without health. One of the things that I found was too often these individuals were so focused on money that they failed to care for their health. They just didn't make it a priority. They didn't have time to go to the gym. They didn't have time to really even work on their minds to have a really healthy mental and physical health. I was fascinated and I started studying CEOs of major companies, and I found that many of them suffered from various ailments. And one of the most common was heart-related problems. In fact, I can remember where I literally found dozens of CEOs who had heart-related problems. And I can remember one time watching one of the morning shows, and they were talking about this gentleman who was super successful, like billionaire successful. And they were going on and on about how successful he was. And I kid you not, he comes out and he was so overweight that the chair he was going to sit in had arms, and they had to go to a break because he couldn't fit in the chair. And so when they came back, they had a chair that didn't have arms. But I was sitting here thinking, isn't that so interesting that they're going on and on about how successful he had been? And when you listen to him, some aspects of his life and what he had done in his business were successful. But when you look at his overall life, I'm thinking, my gosh, she's probably got an emergency medical team, which a lot of these people do because, God forbid they have a heart attack or a stroke or something along those lines, which when you've got a serious weight problem, it's likely going to happen. So by witnessing the results of ignoring our health and the impact it has on our lives, I made health a priority in my life. And while I've never been overweight, I'm not sure I would have made it as big of a priority as I did because of it. And I've had a few health issues myself. One's related to blood sugar, one related to my colon. And I'm truly convinced that the reason I am still very healthy and that they haven't had as big of an impact on me is because I take such good care of myself. Right now, I weigh my ideal weight. And part of it is because I had an issue with blood sugar. And I've never really had an issue with sugar, but my issue was more carbs. And I just didn't realize that carbs less fiber are sugar. And now that I have really reduced my carbs and my sugar, I don't get cravings. It's so fascinating. And I have an entire eating regimen that at some point I'll share with you. But what I will say is I feel better than I felt before. I am stronger than I've probably ever been in my life. In fact, I do weight training 4 times a week and I can lift more weights. It's so funny. Guys come into this class and it's a barbell class. So you do a lot of reps. They come in and they start out really heavy and they like barely can do it. And I just think it's funny that a lot of them I can actually lift more, but it's just more endurance. But the point being is that how do you feel? How do you show up? I have more energy and more vitality than I've had my entire life. Had I not learned what I learned from Centimillionaires early in my career, I'm not sure it would have been such a priority. So I really encourage you, without health in your life, there's very little good that wealth does. And the biggest issue I would say is the fact that, the reality of it is that no matter how much money you have, rarely can money replace or take care of health issues. Sometimes, yes, because you can get some of the leading medical treatment, but overall, it's never optimal. So please make health a priority. As the saying goes, health is wealth. All right. The next insight was what I refer to as the KKDK. And I've talked about this a little bit, but it was so important when it comes to these big millionaires, these really, really successful millionaires from a financial standpoint. And the KKDK trap is what you know that you don't know. And one of the things that's so fascinating is what I refer to as the transference of knowledge. Thankfully, these examples were not my clients, but the themes of the dozens of stories were very similar. And even some of the centimillionaires I met who I heard of their story, it completely fallen into this. So while not every 9-figure millionaire is impacted by the KKDK, it was a lesson that I learned early on, and it was a common theme. So what happens is a lot of times when people have been successful in one area, they think because I've been successful in this area, therefore I'm a genius in that. And I don't care if it has to do with money, if it has to do with financial planning, investment planning, whatever it is. But it's like, I was a genius surgeon, therefore I know everything about investing. And I can remember early on, people would always joke about doctors being terrible with their money. They would always buy like restaurants or buy farms. And I remember one of the first millionaires, and I loved him to death, but he owned a farm. I'm like, what are you doing? And it was so interesting because he really did listen to my counsel. And I thought it was really interesting because he shared so many traps that his peers fell into. And it was just one of the areas where, because they were brilliant in this area, therefore they know everything. Now, that's one thing I would see. And then I also see the flip side of saying that, yeah, I've been an expert here, but therefore I don't know anything here. Now, I can remember I didn't know these people, but I learned about them when I did research for If Only I Had Known. And what happened was they hired an advisor who was telling them all this stuff to do. And make a long story short, he was having them transfer their assets into a trust that he was a trustee of. He was then selling those assets, and they got a call from the Lakers coach saying, why are you selling your beachfront La Jolla property? And they said, we're not selling it. He goes, yeah, I'm buying it. And that's when they found out that he was stealing money from them. So Just because you don't have knowledge in an area and you hire somebody, that does not mean you abdicate it. You still have to know what's going on. And a lot of times, women especially, they'll hire somebody that reminds them of their partner, thinking, oh, they've got my best interest at heart, when in reality, that's not the case. So you got to make sure that you don't go to sleep at the wheel. And you got to make sure that if you don't have the expertise in certain areas, that you hire someone that does. So let's say, for instance, in investment planning, you're not an expert, then hire somebody who is. Now, what you have to do, though, is pay attention. And especially if ultimately you want to handle it and you think you have the time and the ability to do it, then become a master at it. Spend the time to really learn the A to Z's so that when you start taking over the realm and you start doing the work, you're not going to fall in a situation where you fail miserably because you didn't know what you're doing. And the one thing I will say from my research and from so many stories I've heard is that many people who fall prey to the KKDK end up with nothing. And these are people who had $100 million, $300 million net worths. It's tragic. All right, the next thing is relationships. So too many millionaires choose the wrong partner or fail to prioritize their family or even close friends. Several of them were on their third or fourth marriage, and some of them who stayed in a marriage were really in an unhappy marriage. They were having affairs, or they were married to somebody who had a drinking problem. It was just not ideal. So what I encourage you to do is really take the time to make sure you're choosing the right partner. Long before I had money, I prioritized my partner and children in my life. And I'm so glad I do, because today I have a great marriage and a relationship with my kids because it was a priority that I made in my life. Now, one of the things I encourage you to do, and I know this sounds kind of, I don't know, maybe cold and calculating, but you just got to schedule time in your calendar for them. Because what I find is the busier and the more successful you are, if you don't make them a priority and put them in your calendar and make it happen, it doesn't. And so I would rather be a little bit calculating and make it a priority than say, oh, I never get around to it. So the important things need to come first. Your health. Fortunately, I've gotten on the bandwagon of really eating really healthy. I mean, by most people's standards, I ate healthy before I started really eating healthy, but really eliminating sugar and reducing carbs. Well, fortunately, my husband's really on board with me and working out. I'm like, we got to go to a weight training class because I just don't have the discipline to do weight training. I could do cardio and yoga all day long. Something about weights. I can't get up and walk downstairs to our gym. So we started going to a class. Well, it's funny. I mean, he is now like on board. Like if I don't go, he goes. And he literally is like so into it. And so it's really good because it helps having that workout partner. Now, I happen to have become good friends with both of my instructors. And they text me and they're like, if I'm not there, where am I? What am I doing? And I've made friends in class. And so that helps too, because then it's kind of like, I haven't seen you. Where have you been? And then the summers we live in the mountains. So right now we're down in Phoenix for 10 days, but it was funny because I was working out last night and everyone's like, I haven't seen you. I haven't seen you. And so it's just nice to have people there who hold your feet to the fire. And I have to work out when I'm up at my other home. Fortunately, we live on a country club and we have a gym. And so we go down there, and the facility we work out at has on-demand and live classes. And so I'm able to work out. But if I didn't work out when I was up there, I could not do the classes here. In fact, last night, the class was so hard. I'm like, God, these are so hard. But you do feel so good after doing them. All right. Net worth versus income. This was probably, all of the lessons I learned were important, but this one was priceless because even though I had a degree in finance, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, I didn't understand, like many people don't, the difference between accumulation of wealth and earning income. And that was something that I learned from a centimillionaire, is how they think about wealth, assets versus income, what you earn. And the first millionaire I worked with basically told me my goal of earning $100 million was a terrible goal. And because he was not only worth 100 million, but he earned a ton of money, I think around 50 million, I knew he knew what he was talking about. And he shared that my goal shouldn't be to earn 100 million, but instead to accumulate it. And when you have 100 million in the bank, I mean, not literally, but figuratively, you have control of your future. You get to make different choices. You get to choose your destiny. And people who are making 100 million rarely have a lot of assets. And it's fascinating how few do. That insight changed the financial trajectory of my life, and hopefully it will yours too. But you got to focus in on the accumulation of wealth versus earning income. Now, hopefully you do earn a lot of money, but earning a lot of money does not mean spending a lot or spending more. It means focusing in on saving and investing as compared to spending it. So please make that a priority. It'll change your life. So let's recap. Number one, the best lesson for me was the difference between income and net worth and that they're not the same. Accumulation of net worth is more important than income. Now, clearly you need cash flow to pay expenses, but the accumulation of wealth is the goal, and it will allow you to have the security and control over your life and your financial destiny. Relationships. Well, relationships can be challenging. I think that if I look at my different aspects of my life, I would say that's the most challenging because you're dealing with other people and other personalities. And especially if you have kind of like a bottom line decision making capacity, you have to learn that it's got to turn off and it's got to change to have deep relationships with your family and friends and taking the time. Time is probably the biggest issue, right? Spending the time with your partner, spending the time with your family, spending the time with your kids. It's so easy to make your career and earning money a priority, but it's absolutely critical that you take that time. And it's one of the most important determinants of how fulfilled your life will be. And if one insight I can give you is living a fulfilled life is the most important and money is next because it's very difficult to live fulfilled if you don't have money because things cost money. I mean, let's face it, if you can't afford medical care and you're sick, it's a problem. If your kids want to go to a certain university or want to extend their education, you can't afford it, it's a problem. So be really aware of that. And you want to take time to choose the right mate and be careful who gets into your inner circle. That's something that was so helpful to me is that not everyone gets in. I want to be friends with everyone and I'm a people pleaser. So it's like I always want everyone to be happy. Well, everyone's not always going to be happy, number one. And number two, you've got to have a barrier of entrance. Like, how do they think? What are their values before they get in? So important. All right, the next area is the KKDK. While you may be a brilliant surgeon or franchise owner or business owner, that does not mean you know everything. If you're not an expert at financial planning or investment planning, you got to commit to master it before you take the reins of it. Hire someone who is. Figure out what you need to know. I mean, somebody asked me, how did you learn all this? And I'm like, well, if you spent 70 hours a week for like 35 years doing it, you'd be an expert too. It takes a lot of time, not only to learn it, but to stay up on it. And there's a lot of things that you learn just by being in the trenches. So you've got to be willing to commit the time and have the interest in it if you're going to do it. But just make sure you do it before you just start taking over and making decisions, unless you really have a goal of being broke. And then wealth without health. So health is wealth. And I think when you don't have health, it's like a living HELL. There is nothing fun when you're ill. And as I mentioned, money won't fix it. So make your mental and physical health a top priority. It's so important. And, we've seen so many people who have died from drug problems and alcohol problems. And a large part of it is they had more money than they knew what to do with, but they didn't have the mental health. And then other people died because, they weren't well and they didn't make health a priority. And so they died of illnesses. So don't let that be you. A lot of the things you can do are life changing. And one of the things that I'm definitely going to do a an episode on health because I have learned so much and I'm so thankful that I am so healthy. It's so scary when you're not. I literally, for a year, did not know what was wrong with me. And, traditional doctors really did not do anything. And fortunately, because I have money, I was able to afford a $450 an hour functional medicine doctor and a $150 naturopath that I had to pay out of pocket, and all the tests, the thousands of dollars of tests that went with it. But I will say, all of that said and done, and I got valuable insight. The bottom line was I was the one who figured out what was going on. I was the one that realized that my blood sugar was trending in the wrong way. It was trending towards prediabetes. I have dropped my blood sugar from 5.7 to 5.3 just by diet. The point being is that once you start getting into really eating healthy and really understanding how blood sugar works and the different chemicals, and it is amazing how much better you feel. Like I feel so much better. And of course, sleep is critical too. But my friends, you got this. Just focus in on these 4 lessons and you can't help but dramatically improve your results regardless of what your goal is. So there you have it. Now, before you get back to your day, I want you to schedule 1 hour into your calendar over the next couple of weeks, just 1 hour. And during that hour, I want you to determine one action you're going to take this year to grow your net worth, just one. I also want you to commit to when you're going to dive into your budget and determine how you can save more or even earn more so you can save more. And then I want you to identify one action that you can take to improve your health and one action to improve your relationships. One of the things I will say about relationships that have been priceless is just taking more time. Sitting there and listening to the boring and mundane, sitting there and listening to what the person wants to share. And I remember great advice I got when my kids were early. They said, just sit there, let them sit on your lap and let them just talk and do whatever they want to. And when they're done, they will go and you'll have a lot less distractions. And it was so true because what happens is if you're like, yeah, just hold on a minute. And then they're keep interrupting you. But when they feel you're present and you really care about them and they've got your time and your attention, it's amazing. So I really encourage you to practice out with your kids, your friends, your partner, all your loved ones. And the one thing I can tell you is that if you take the time to improve your relationships and your health and your money, you're going to be so glad you did. And while there's very little I can guarantee, that is one thing I can. So I hope you enjoyed our episode and I'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode. If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for next step finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Ba'u, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.